You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the traditional masculinity training ground. I'm excited to have you here, so let's get started. I mentioned on the show last week that North American Kings is here to help rebalance the scales and provide men of all ages tips and training in order to help them combat the dystopian message being blasted at them. That message, that manhood, as it was meant to be, is wrong, dangerous, and that it should be abandoned. We'll be spending time crushing those theories here, but I want to start with the message for our younger listeners. Always question sources. Don't take anything at face value, even what I'm telling you. Sure, if you're going to believe anyone at their word, I'm certain anyone telling you this same message that I am is leading you along the right path. But I encourage you as men and also women to verify everything to the extent that you can. This day and age, the internet, it's not all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot of information out there. We can't trust sources anymore. I'm sorry. Objective sources are starting to bleed in with opinion. Journalism today is not what it used to be. So I'm encouraging you guys to look for yourself. See things objectively, or as objectively as you can. You will often find that you'll run into a brick wall. Now, the new feminist creation that is toxic masculinity doesn't go back that far. And while we are looking, ask yourself a few questions along the way. How long has the subject been discussed? This question is entirely valid because newer philosophies don't have a lot of results to show right now. In the few cases that they do, particularly amongst our subject matter, the results aren't very positive for them. Now, I ask you to verify the sources you rely on because all too often opinion is being projected as fact. This here is an opinion show, but I'm doing my best to present you with evidence and other sources to help you confirm these thoughts objectively. Objective thought, it's hard to come by these days. I'm going to continue to repeat this, and other sources will do that as well. Like, I'm not alone in this. The reason I mention that is because when you've reached the limit of your verification skills, it's now judgment time. Do you have enough information to make a judgment or confirm a theory? It's perfectly all right to sit on it. When rubber meets the road, the best leaders and people managers are able to take in a lot of information, sift through what's immediately relevant and what's not. They're then able to rough out risks associated with the information available using logic and common sense. Then they'll make decisions that will impact others. Those that can do this and get close to the target when all the information is available at the lowest cost to do so, those are the leaders that stand out. I make this point as a coach to people managers quite often. I do so here because we're dealing with feeling. Almost like religion, some of this is taken on faith. We weigh the known and the unknown and validate what we can observe. And then we make a case for what we believe in. We take all of that and make judgments. This is what feminism has been doing since its inception. This is what men need to be doing publicly. Let me be clear, no one is safe in this. Eventually, you'll be confronted for being the man that you are or for doing the acts that you're pursuing. Now, when that happens, you'll need to pick a side. My hope is that enough people are armed with this knowledge that we at least go down swinging. If you don't get out of that conversation unbloodied, fine. But put up a fight, gentlemen. We need to. One of the fronts that we need to pursue is that the definition of manhood itself is being redefined by those who are fundamentally unqualified to do so. Who is that? Women. Now, you'll be asked, and I get asked all the time, don't women get a say? And again, as I did in the first episode of this series, the answer is partly. Women get to drive the narrative only so far. They can do this through influence. They don't tell us what we are, but they can influence what we pursue based on what they like. Depending on the women that are around you, they'll either do this explicitly or they'll do it very subtly. But they do this by influencing what men do and participate in, and they do it by incentivizing us with their presence. Note, I did not say with their bodies, although in some cases that's part of it. Let's be real. Their presence is the prize for us. Now let me ask you, what is it that your significant other does that keeps you engaged? Do they bring you confidence? They bring you peace, companionship, balance? If it's just sex, boys, I'm afraid to tell you the bad news. You'll need to find something else to bond over, because there's a secret that's kind of getting out there. She can get that anywhere. Just as the great Joe Rogan once said during one of his comedy albums, that's free. She can get that anywhere. But here's another question. Now, what do you do, men or significant other? What do you do that makes her want to stick around? In my family, I'm the cool and steady hand when my wife feels panic. She keeps me balanced when I'm a little off kilter, right? We balance each other. I also fix things. There is only one thing that my wife likes more than me coming in after a long day in the garage covered in oil. That's me lifting up one of my children over my head by the ankle when they're laughing about it, for me to then show them affection, right? But whatever it is that you do as a nation of men, we tend to participate in it, even if it's in small ways. Now, these things that women like, do they define us as who we are? There's an old joke out there from a great comedian. I don't know who this comedian is. I've forgotten, and it's escaping me, and I cannot verify it. I've tried. So if this is your joke, I apologize. But when you see an older guy, the style that he's wearing or that he's got on is what he happened to be wearing during the best day of his life. Or in some cases, like the best year. But I think that's true. And I also think that this worked because those best years or that best day happened when we felt the most fulfilled. Now, you cannot feel that fulfilled if you aren't being true to your own identity. Now, furthermore, the dude who's stuck wearing graphic tees, jeans, and work boots, if he weren't being true to himself and choosing that style, he'd be led down another path by someone with other styles, or someone who finally said something or gave him a suggestion that did resonate with him. Now that means, proves even, that men ultimately own what defines manhood. Why would we let people who don't even like us define what we should be striving for in that case? Now, it's never too late to do the right thing. I made this exact point to some higher ups at a business I was working at some time ago. We were discussing a program rollout and some of the struggles that we were having with it. I was relatively new, and this was like one of the first conversations that I had on the subject matter. And after some lengthy discussion, we finally landed on the critical factor that we needed to adjust. I asked why we didn't make that change now, because we, as a group, had come to a consensus. Now, one of the managers said, we haven't done it like that before. Now, he said it with the implication was that the employees weren't going to take kindly to it because we didn't start the program off perfectly. In my head, I'm thinking, no program does. There are always adjustments. We want to adjust as little as possible, but we have to change. We have to adapt as a business to what works and what doesn't. So I responded, so we're choosing to perform badly. Now, I got a smirk from one of the other managers, the I know, but I wasn't going to be the guy who said it smile. And let me be clear, this did not go over well. There weren't any immediate ramifications, but that did set the tone for a lot of our future conversations on the exact same problem. Now, I think the point still stands. If we know the solution, if we as men know the solution, but can't get over the hump of our past decisions, we're doomed to fail slowly. That wasn't the right call then, because the company itself is still struggling with the cultural problems with that approach. And it is not the right call for men. Get in the fight, gentlemen. If you have any interest in survival of what it means to be us, if you have any interest in feeling fulfilled and whole, get in this fight. Men do have an innate sense of what makes a man. Now, I have a question. So, does anybody remember the Man Law commercials that Miller Lite did, like back a few years ago with Burt Reynolds? Wildly entertaining. I mean, they didn't sell much beer with it, but the culture of the piece struck a chord with people. There was a lot of talk about it, and Miller Lite was hyping that for a little while. I think that's because they hit a pure truth that resonated with people, as pure truths are ought to do. Men today are like the man law today is kind of akin to the bro code. Now, I like the bro code, but I'm not in love with it. Now, that was popularized by the show How I Met Your Mother, like the millennials version of Friends from back in the late 90s. Like this bro code hit mainstream when that show came out. It was a very entertaining show. But it was effectively a list of rules of how men should behave amongst other men when on the hunt for a female conquest. Now, I don't ascribe to the bro code because I don't hunt anymore. I don't really think I ever did. If I did it awfully. I courted women more than anything else, and sometimes I even did that in the wrong ways. You know, sometimes it was great, sometimes not so much. But what the bro code did get correct was that it was for men and between men. Now, man law is similar. Like the commercials pointed out, with some triviality, there were things that we can all agree on. That is still the case today. It's very rare today, you know, with politics the way it is, or policy, or different opinions on how we should raise our families. It's hard for us to agree on anything, but it is innate that some things can be universal, and that's kind of what those commercials hit on. Now, man law is invoked today in very different ways. Given our socio-political culture towards men, we don't mention it lightly. You know, it used to be kind of a joke, but now, like you say, man law, and it's kind of serious. You know, I was having a conversation with a friend this week, and we were talking about something that was personal to my family. And it needed to stay between the husbands, between the wives and the kids and all that other stuff. The moment was almost solemn. And I said, hey, between you and me, man law, X, Y, and Z. I kind of spelled things out. Now, we didn't discuss the thing for a few days, but when we did get back to talking, he brought up the point very specifically. He was surprised by my invocation, but he implicitly understood the gravity I wielded with the utterance. Now, I told him quite clearly, I think that's what man law is for. It's something serious. It's between men. You know, and he agreed. It was not between boys. You know, I'm talking information that will affect other people. You know, what kind of bond was created there between two men pioneering on their missions to undertake the completion of the 4 cardinal responsibilities. Now, because we can sense what makes a man, this leads me to believe that there is a consistent core of our collective definition of manhood. Now, I say core specifically because how we choose to get there is very much affected by culture, environment, and our associations. And I'm not denying that. The core of our definition, though, is important nevertheless. Discovering that collectively will take time, but here's the thing: we've done it. It's been established for thousands of years, and only until recently has it been questioned. So I know we can get there again. Now, there's a great 2012 article to this point by Paul Nathanson and Catherine K. Young. It's called Misandry and Emptiness: Masculine Identity in a Toxic Cultural Environment. The link in bibliography will be issued in the show description. In this article, it says, in today's modern culture, men's personal identity can only emerge at the expense of the collective identity. Now, this means that there's going to be a parting of the ways between real men and the new wave academic, the male feminist, i.e., honorary women. Another quote, women who, quote, have created a healthy collective identity have directly or indirectly and intentionally or unintentionally an unhealthy one for men. Means that men must choose between accepting what women think about manhood and thinking for themselves about manhood. In other words, they must establish a collective identity. Now, feminists say in meaning what they want in words, and this is kind of paraphrasing the article, but it says very explicitly. Well, actually, it says this. So, what I'm saying, feminists say in meaning what they want in words. Women are weak and need protection from the evil misogynists. This makes it okay to propagate misandry, or as defined by the article, a culture of hatred for men. Now, that's not anger, because anger is an emotional response to something immediate. Men are godlike figures and therefore can withstand a culture of hatred and can withstand and not be hurt by the most vile of stereotypes. So this is effectively saying it's okay to hate us. Now, another quote, human history is the history of successful cultural revolutions, most of which have been technological and all of which have led to the gradual obsolescence of men, and by now left men without a distinctive and necessary function as men, without the possibility of being publicly valued as men, and therefore without the basis for any healthy identity specifically as men. So what that says, in unbroken language, what that says is we've slowly worked our way or produced our way or improved our way out of the job. Not to say that we were pack animals or we're not beasts of burden, but close. But as we've stated in with the 4 cardinal responsibilities, men have adapted and men have carved their way into a spot where that until very recently was widely accepted by everyone. Now, the article concludes, while some men have adapted, quote, others, however, unwittingly internalize misandry, unquote. So this is leading to the toxic behaviors that men are act out in dealing with their own self-hatred. Now, men and friends, we must be vocal about this. This is not acceptable for us to, 1, let other men languish in this state, and 2, it is not acceptable for us to allow this to go unchecked. It's never too late to do the right thing. The things that we can cement in stone, the cardinal responsibilities: provide, protect, teach, and discipline. I will repeat these often because we've done the distillation for you. There's no junk in it. It is as pure as it will get. I've said this out loud in dozens of conversations. Not once has there been any disagreement from men or women. From here, we now have a foundation from which we can rely on as we search for more of the collective definition of man. Now, I'm going to outline what is more because I have a very specific idea of what that is. But I encourage you to search for yourself. Question your sources, even me. Searching for objective, fact-based material, now verified by how you feel when you practice what you have found, will ultimately lead you to those carrying this message of traditional masculine values. Even if it isn't me, I still want you to take that advice from wherever you feel comfortable getting it from. Now, as North American kings take steps forward outlining our vision for manhood, cardinal responsibility number 4 will keep us grounded. Discipline. Now, this means socially correcting men and other people who are taking the manhood brand or the name of manhood and doing it a disservice. Now, I went to a bar for New Year's in 2013, 2014, and I got a real close-up example of this happening. I was working the night shift, and I went out early, and they let us out early for the festivities. Now, we were out in my hometown, we celebrated, and we did some dancing. Now, while we were on the upstairs dance floor, I noticed this guy drunkenly making like this large circle amongst the shoulder-to-shoulder people on the dance floor. So he's carving a path, and he's walking in this giant circle that took up most of the dance floor. Now he's bumping in between people. He's kind of like bumping in and then continuing on. And he bumped past me. I thought he was on his way to the exit, because this dance floor it was fenced, and then it had this ramp that went up, and it was an entry exit ramp. So I thought he was making his way to the exit. No, instead he slipped past me. He just does another pass around the dance floor. Now, protect. My first thing was make sure that we hadn't been pickpocketed by this guy if he's just pretending to be drunk. So I checked my wife's purse. I told Clark and his wife, who were with us at the time, I told him to check his wallet. Everything's fine. So then we decided we were taking him out. Now, I don't mean like we were going to take him out back. Like, we just wanted to get him off the dance floor. But before he made it back to me, another gentleman, maybe 5 feet in front of me, made the same decision. And I was very proud. Like, yes, it's not just me. I'm not alone. But this gentleman confronted the guy, and who did this like drunken jerk and twist, and he got around the guy. Oh, lucky day. Now it's my turn. So the drunk is still like talking to this first gentleman when I approach him from behind, and I took him by put my hand like roughly on his shoulder. Now he turned to me like he was going to resist, and then he sees how big I am when compared to him and the guy that first talked to him, and he completely caved. Ah! Man, there's nothing that says you're the dude like a guy who thinks he's going to resist, then sees you and says, I don't know, I can't do that. So, yes, boost to ego, Glenn, win. But at this point, both me and the other random guy walked him right off the dance floor and into the hands of the awaiting bouncers. Boom, roasted. Cardinal responsibility number 4, discipline each other and keep us on the right path as men. Like, we need to be able to do that. Now, I mentioned last week that we need to publicly act manly and defend our sovereignty on the subject matter. Now, this is bridging on the principle of self-determination, a North American king's foundation value that we absolutely will discuss in triplicate some other time. Now, cardinal responsibility of discipline in part means the ability and us telling the hard truths. Now, this ability to tell hard truths affects us everywhere. It affects us in coaching and business, in our personal relationships, even amongst our families. All these conversations rely on this skill. Now, the best managers and partners out there have the courage to even engage in these tough conversations, much less having them successfully. One of the best managers I've ever had, did this very, very well. And he was willing to have those tough conversations, especially with a guy like me. Now, this gentleman was tough. He was a real man. And he took me in as this 24-year-old production supervisor that was very hungry, willing to get things done, hard worker, and very passionate about what I was passionate about. And, if that meant some disagreements or some discussions that we weren't able to have, we had them civilly, but, we had passionate discussions. The best part about this gentleman, he was willing to fight me as hard as I was willing to fight him on things that I was passionate about. And I'll be honest with you, that's exactly what I needed. I'll never forget, oh my God, the time he got me. We're sitting in his office and we're rolling out something that I didn't agree with. I didn't know how to tell this. I was not in a position to effectively communicate this to what I knew was going to be a very tough crowd. And this boss of mine was willing to fight me on it. And I got a little indignant, and I said, I sat back and said, you know what? Why don't you come to my shift and tell my people that? And the look of, I got you, buddy, that he gave me was, I don't get scared, but I definitely knew I'd stepped in it, because he leaned back and he said, so you're asking me to do your job? Ugh, he got me. He listened to what he did in that coaching. He was willing to wrestle with me back and forth, and I appreciate that to this day. But this gentleman backed me into a place he knew I wasn't going to go. I was never going to stand up there and say I wasn't going to do my job. I was excellent at my job. The fact that he got me to that position and wrestled me there is something I'm never going to forget, and I can never thank him enough for, because that helped me become, one, the coach that I am today, but also the supervisor and the production manager and all these other positions that I've taken in the time since. He made that possible by wrestling me into these positions and having those rough, even fighting discussions with me, so that, you know, I left understanding the importance of what he was saying. He knew it beforehand, but he was willing to do that and give me that extra time that I needed, and I will always appreciate that. Another story of having a tough conversation, this is one I had, and I mentioned before, we need to engage. We're not going to win them all. And this story actually happened between me and my father. Let's say he was participating, or he's doing something that I didn't agree with, and, you know, something that he didn't take as seriously as I did. And, you know, I pulled my father aside, like any manager is trained to do. And this is while I was still in college, so I'm not that guy yet. And I pulled him aside, and we had a face-to-face. And I'm going to remember the look on his face for the rest of my life. He looked at me and cracked a smile, because I was using words that he had used on me all of my life. And he smiled and he laughed in my face. But even though he laughed in my face, and having a really honest discussion with him at 20, you know, I was a man that day. You know, so even though it didn't happen or go down the way that I thought it should have gone, you know, the fact that I abided by this principle of discipline. I mean, hey, I'm gonna correct you for something that even you have told me is not right. I made up for the blatant emasculation by my own father after using words he had used on me 1,000 times. We still need to engage, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to actively have these conversations. Engaging is the first step. Now, socially checking other men is a cornerstone of this principle. You can see this anywhere. I just told you a story about talking to a guy, or like taking a guy physically off the dance floor because he was being a nuisance, and people cheered. It was nuts. But, you know, either out of the town or in groups of friends or family and social interactions, you know, the ability to self-discipline as a group is pivotal. Now, women do this more subtly and far more brutally to other women. Now, I think that's because men, and I don't know this, this is me just thinking about it. I think women do it as a punishment, where men do it as a course correction. And I think that's why guys can get into physical fights and then drink together afterwards. And we've all seen it happen. But part of this stems from the scientifically proven ability of men to be able to swallow our emotions temporarily in order to get the necessary things done. And I think in this respect, we need to be able to stop conversations that seek to define manhood incorrectly. You know, this goes for other men as well. Now, I was having a conversation with a superior of mine who, to this day, I have a great amount of affection for. Now, we were talking, this is a different supervisor, by the way. Now, we were talking about dream cars. Now, mine is a Toyota Tacoma crew cab with a 6-foot bed. I'm just throwing that out there. Now, after some sharing, I said that what I wanted immediately was a very nice minivan. And just a little backstory. My wife and I were on the cusp of having our second child, knowing that we were going to go for 3. Now, while sedans can get the job done with that size family, we knew that a minivan would work for the future for us. Now, the best way to tell, ladies and gentlemen, is to go rent one of these bad boys, because I will tell you it's awesome. Van life. Now, I would say do it for a road trip. Now, I usually flip my schedule. I mentioned I worked third shift before. I do that to this day. I will flip to third shift hours and drive on those third shift hours, which usually start between 9 and midnight. And then we'll drive from 9 to midnight until like 7 in the morning. Now, traffic is super light through big cities, and the kids sleep most of the way. So I'm super pumped about that. Now, imagine your favorite podcasts, multiple of them, a plural, on a playlist with no interruptions, no bathroom breaks, and no traffic. Gentlemen, oh my God, it's awesome. Now, your wife is in the middle rows behind you, so she can take care of the kids who are sleeping soundly, but she can take care of them if it's necessary. Does that sound awesome to you? I've done it. Believe me, it's amazing. Okay. Now, my boss says, after I told him I wanted a minivan, he says, "Man card," and he holds out his hand like I owe him something. Now, he's like, "You can't want a minivan over a truck and keep your card." Now, with great respect to this gentleman, I wasn't going to take that. I said, "How is sacrificing what you want for your family's clear needs worthy of losing one's card?" Now, he huffed a little and let the point drop. Now, he may have known that he opened up a can of worms too big for him to swallow, but maybe not. Now, the assertion did not go unchallenged, and that's the point. But all of these points aside, this is still a great man that I'm speaking about, and there's still a lot of respect there, but don't let those points go unchallenged, even men to men. If he's going to take manhood in a different direction, that should. It's not superficial truck stuff. It's sacrificing for your family for what they need. That's more manly of those two things. And I was not going to let that stand, that misconception. But moving on, I want to end this episode with an article I came across on slate.com. We'll delve into current events on this show as it pertains to our mission, but this is not a news show. There are plenty of fights out there for us to partake in. Our theater of war is with respect to manhood, not politics. Now, certain political shows will talk about this, and this has been discussed previously this week, because this article kind of bridges both. And the thing I've noticed recently, that just this past week has been crazy with news about, like, particular to the manhood issues. But I've seen a few articles about stay-at-home moms that felt worthy for us to discuss in the show. They seemed like stretches for us in the main, but this one is along the exact same path, and it deals with men in the exact context that we're concerned with. Now, again, on this topic, the North American Kings podcast, we couldn't stay out. This was too on point. It cannot go unnoticed. So the article link will be in the description of the show. It's titled, "I Don't Want My Wife to Be a Stay-at-Home Mom." It starts, "I am a new father to a beautiful 10-month-old girl. My wife's company has a generous maternity leave policy, and she has been at home with our daughter since the birth and is scheduled to go back to work just after her first birthday in January. She recently told me that she doesn't want to go back to her job and would like to be a stay-at-home parent instead." Now, this is, just to frame this up, this is an article to a columnist, like, looking for advice. So I don't want to knock this guy too hard. I mean, ultimately, he's upset that his wife doesn't want to return to work. Now, money's an issue. Like, we're changing incomes in a big way. Lifestyle changes, plans for the future change. They all change so short term. Like, long term, I think they're going to actually even out. Also, this gentleman's a new dad. And this is like COVID dad. He has no clue at this point how having a child is going to change things. He would have experienced this by now pre-COVID. But being cooped up, I highly doubt it. Like, kids, there's a lot of startup cost, but it's not as high as people think. The thing that changes is your ability to go out and do those things that he's kind of complaining about. But I'll get to that. But I get his disappointment, and I get that things changed that he was not prepared for. But the article continues, and I cut this a little bit, but it continues. Honestly, I don't want her to quit her job. She earns about the same as I do, and while we could make ends meet on my income alone, it would impact our ability to save, and we'd need to give up one of our cars and cut way back on the extras that make life more enjoyable. I also just don't want a stay-at-home wife. I really admired my wife for her work ethic, and I want her to set a good example for our daughter too. Seeing her give up like this is really disappointing. I gently asked her if she thought her change in attitude could be related to a possible mental health issue or postpartum depression, but she didn't take that well. She says that she only cares about our daughter and that's where all of her energy needs to be right now. And that if I love her, I will let her do this. I do love my wife, and I'm not interested in divorce, but I'm seeing a whole new side of her that I just don't like or admire. What should I do? His handle, suddenly the breadwinner. Now, again, I get there's a change in lifestyle. I get that argument. He mentioned that he's able to support them with a few changes to their spending and losing their car somehow. He mentions that he feels the thing that attracted him to his wife is gone. Again, that's tough. I mean, I can empathize with that. But actually, the article was a letter, again, to a columnist. So kudos to him for reaching out. You know, if guys are struggling with these things, like generally we keep them bottled up. So he is making some strides in the right direction. The columnist answered pretty well, as you guys can see if you read the article. But in my opinion, it was not as effectively as I can. So here we go. So suddenly the breadwinner. Man up. There is nothing more manly than being solely responsible for the welfare and survival of your family. If you haven't been given this responsibility or haven't had this much responsibility yet, again, I've been there. I understand how anxious that can be, especially when it's your first kid. But remember, you are not alone, and you were made for this. Brother, a good portion of men out there are working hard to get where you're sitting today. I've been working for years, hustling, in order to finally get to a point where I could let my wife stay home. Like, that was the goal. So I know you were attracted to her ambition. Your wife is sacrificing in a way that you seem unwilling to. She's doing your job for you. She's never going to be alone again. Like, I hope you understand that. She's going to be more important than you will ever feel. Now, fathers are extremely important in life, so I'm certainly not devaluing what fathers can bring. But in these early years, you're playing a support role. Get comfortable with that. Your wife is deciding to be the CEO of Suddenly the Breadwinner Inc. Right? Now, fulfill your role, which you've stated you are able to do. Allow your family to be happy. Now, this isn't a happy wife or happy life argument. You are actively lobbying to make your family less happy by making your wife feel less female, right? Like less of a mother. Now, I don't know what you call female emasculation, but this is it. And belittling her by asking her if she was mentally ill. Now, that's not the same as postpartum depression. And if you mush those together, and which I hope you did, you know, like if you whiffed that hard in real life with your soulmate, I do feel for you. You know, I've made mistakes. I don't think I've made that mistake yet, but I've made some certain mistakes that continue to get brought up. Believe me, bro, you will be reminded of this for a long time. I recommend that you get over this feeling of not liking your wife and you start admiring her for the things that she's doing for you and your children. You know, if you guys have more than one, yeah, believe me, she's going to be far more important than you are. So stop showing your weakness to your family. That I think we can all agree on as men. Even if we have emotions and feelings and stuff like that, there's a lot of times where it's inappropriate to show anybody them. All right? Now, I'm glad this gentleman went to someone, a female columnist, to get straight on this. Like, great. Bro, next time ask a man. He'll tell you to nut up and be strong for your family. All right? I hope if this guy listens to this show, provide, protect, teach, and discipline. That's what your family needs from you. So start doing it, right? Believe me, in 4 years or whenever, when your children start to go to school, she might reevaluate going back to work. And then you guys can have that conversation. And you're going to go back and laugh about how weak you sounded to a complete stranger and blasted that all over the known media sphere. Right? So congratulations. But we're gonna end right there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Glenn Kowalski, and this is the North American Kings podcast. If you liked this show and want to show your support, please follow or subscribe for free at Castos, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from. Also, please give us a 5-star review and tell anyone you think may want or need this message to come check us out. Good luck out there.